Hello, everyone, and welcome to part two of my conversation with Beth Page. I know we've had some technical difficulties. If you saw me getting on earlier trying to figure it out, that's exactly what I was doing. So I want to thank everyone for showing. Beth Page is a PhD psychologist who works for an executive recruiting firm, provides services for companies that are looking for C-level executives, does an evaluation on them, and makes recommendations. Her webinar, first webinar we did was the psychology of the company executive. Do you have what it takes? It was so popular that people said, hey, can you do a part two? So Beth and I talked and thought, well, what about I'm becoming a leader, becoming a good leader? And so today's topic is how to be that leader, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So Beth, let's first of all, you and I have known each other for 20 years.
Right.
It's been a long time. And I guess when I say that, we're really dating ourselves.
Well, I asked. I
noticed you said a quick yes. You said a quick yes with that, right? But we both lived in St. Louis at that time, and you and your husband were both clients of mine. You have two beautiful children. Mm-hmm. And you just celebrated, they're from Guatemala. You just celebrated a quinceañera for your daughter.
We did. Yeah, the youngest one. So, yeah.
And ironically, they're Will and Grace too. That was the time Will and Grace was popular.
I know, but that, those are family names. I picked them before the TV show.
Okay, you picked them before the TV show. That's good.
Yes, and I almost gave them up because the TV show, and I was like, nope, I had them first. So.
Believe me, I get it. Some names are popular.
Yeah.
Beth, tell me, what in your mind is the definition of a leader?
Yeah, so and a little bit, Rudy, where I want to go with this conversation. So for me, a leader is someone who is very clear about who they are and their purpose, kind of their purpose in general, why they're here, and they are able to take that deep sense of knowing of who they are and their purpose and infuse it into their leadership. And it impacts what they do, why they do it. It impacts the way that they show up with others. It enables them to be authentic and genuine. And it also, if they're really good at that, it helps them sincerely encourage other people to find their purpose and their passion for the work that they do and why they do it. And that's especially important these days.
Well, but what qualities make up a leader? See, that's the question. You see all these courses on leadership, and are you born being a leader, or is it something you have to learn?
Yeah, that I would say, so certain people are, so there's a lot of things that go into a leader. It kind of at the core, personality traits, if you will, there's drive. So some people just have a drive to show up and be a leader. They're motivated. They're the ones that speak first. They're the ones that try to, rally people around them to make things happen. You can see that drive when people are kids. So their drive is important. You have to, often that goes along with the drive, you have to want it. To be a leader, you have to work hard, right? I mean, there's a lot of competition. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be kind of knocking you out of the way, trying to compete with you, get there first. So you have to have a motivation to achieve. I mean, that's another key part. And then you've got to have capability, right? You've got to have some degree of knowledge, capability with whatever it is that you're going to lead. So those are kind of the core things. But beyond that, I think you want me to talk about beyond that, right? Kind of the other.
Well, I think, but I think purpose is very important. Yeah. Because if you don't know what the purpose is, how can you lead others?
Well, and it's the thing that will keep you going when everything gets difficult, right? Which we know things get difficult all the time now.
Well, we have a saying that it's easy to manage when times are good, but it's tougher to manage when times are bad, because that's when a leader has to make really tough decisions sometimes, who to let go. But when we're talking about the positive aspect of leadership, in my mind, the leader is somebody who somehow inspires the willingness in people to follow them, that motivates them to say that my purpose is the same as this person's purpose.
Right.
To me, that's the most effective way of leadership.
Right. Yeah. It's the why you do what you do. So, and it usually ties into your values. I think purpose there's a couple of pieces to it. One is it's your values, what's important to you, what's meaningful to you, the way you want to make a difference in the world. And then the people that I think are most kind of energized, if you will, in that purpose are the people that also have a really good sense of what they do really, really well, and leverage that, move from that space. And it's kind of this intersection between the thing that is meaningful to you, the legacy you want to leave, the thing that inspires you, that you want to accomplish in your life, and marrying that with the things you do really well. I mean, some of us we all have things that we do, and the uniqueness of the things you do really well.
Well, there are people who are rude, they're gruff, and there are people who are laid back. In your mind, can both be leaders? I mean, some people try to lead by fear.
Yes.
And other people try to lead by, say, collaboration.
Yeah. If the fear part, that's, people are not going to respond to that very well, right? Especially now. They're not going to respond to it very well. So I think a key, so when I think about those core leadership characteristics, one of them is absolutely the ability to connect well with others. And that is a combination of being respectful, being inclusive, having the skills to get other people's ideas, bring people's ideas together, lead people in an inclusive way so everyone's feels heard, but at the same time it's everyone feels heard, but then you're able to align people to move in a particular direction. And that usually takes excellent communication skills. So just beating people over the head is not going to work. People will shut down as opposed to come along with you.
Don't forget, you are watching Conversations with Rudy Rivera. But there are also people who, I guess, try to scare people. And we see a lot of this now with, a lot of the outrageous statements that are being people follow, like the people who followed, the January 6th. And that to me always leads to disaster, right? Because they're motivated by fear, perhaps even in many cases motivated by hate. But at the end of the day, they always seem to fizzle out, right? I mean, Hitler was able to motivate people by causing them to hate another group of people.
Right.
And so that was the core that brought him in. So leadership can be used for bad things also, in addition to to trying to do what's best for everybody. And I think you as a follower have to decide, is this the vision that I want to follow?
Right. I mean, right. That's a key part of it. Yes, you have to do I would not disagree with that.
Now, there are people who do not like to delegate. I've seen this quite a bit, because they think nobody else can do it better than they can, or they think, oh, I want to get the credit for it. So a young man from the mailroom comes up and says, I have this great idea. I have this wonderful idea. And the manager says, oh, I think it's pretty good. And he takes it to his boss and makes it sound like his idea. I mean, that's not a leader. Right? The leader's going to say, guess what John in the mailroom discovered? Right.
Yes, they're sharing credit. Absolutely. I mean, they're first of all, you have to bring those ideas out, right? That's the first important part. And then you absolutely share credit. You don't take credit for other people's ideas.
And the leader also basically wants to motivate people to do things, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
it's interesting. The independent thinking among individuals can also go towards the collective good in that sense. If you've got
Mhm.
everybody streaming ideas and you've got the leader encouraging that, then eventually one of those ideas are going to stick.
Right.
Many examples of that in the business world where people have, they've, said, I'll give you $10,000. Ritz Hotels used to say, we'll give you $10,000 to develop a project.
Hmm.
I know a law firm in Germany, a good friend of mine runs a law firm in Germany, and every partner is authorized to spend a certain amount of money without the other partner's position for something that might be for the benefit of the firm. So that is an example of leadership.
Right. And and I think what you're talking about is empowering people.
Right.
So I think a good leader, now we're really in the kind of domain is how do you set enough structure, enough vision, and then how do you then allow people to be empowered to realize that. So I do think a good leader is able to set vision. And now I'm talking about a good leader at the top. I mean, there's plenty of good leaders lower in organizations that don't necessarily set vision, but a good leader at the top is able to set vision. They're able to be very strategic, and then they're able to set enough structure that people know where they're going. So, what's the goals? How are we going to be measured? What are the timelines, so that there's some parameters there that people can operate within, but then they give them the tools, and they give them the resources, and they let them do some figuring it out on their own. They create some empowerment. So people have skin in the game. People want to be, that generates intrinsic motivation. So if you're telling me what to do all the time, at a certain point, people just check out, right? I mean, it doesn't require that much, and it becomes demotivating, and you're not sure is it's because I'm doing something good or just because I'm carrying out orders someone else is giving me. But if you let people wrestle with it a little bit and have some of their own experiences, then they are motivated from the inside. And you'll get, people will be much more engaged. Absolutely.
Well, there's a whole list of the characteristics of a leader. If you look at the Indeed board, for example, it says it's your hardworking, open-minded, empathetic, visionary, confident, honorable, ethical, positive, humble, communicative, a list about 20 things.
Yes, yes.
But you can't be all 20 things. Don't forget, you are watching Conversations with Rudy Rivera.
Well, some of us do some of those things better than others. I think the things that I would say, that some of the things on those lists, I think everybody can probably do if you try and you focus in development. So, for example, working to improve communication skills, staying humble. Some of those basic things I would say are table stakes that everybody would need to work on. Some of the things that I think some people do better than others is, for example, some people are much better at operations than others. They're much better at organizing things. They have an operational mindset that allows them to set out structure that enables people to execute things well. Some leaders are much better at vision and strategy. Some leaders are going to be very much what I would call subject matter expert leaders. So those are the things where I do think having a sense of your unique strengths, how that combines with your values, helps you pick the areas where you want to lead.
I agree. I think the leader is the person that knows his weaknesses also,
Mm-hmm.
and brings people around who can supplement them. I mean, who can augment them. And I think that's also being honest with yourself, that you have to know what your abilities are, right?
100, yeah, this 200%. So self-awareness is also at the top of the list of being a good leader. And again, that's another one of those things that's table stakes. So I think everyone needs to work on self-awareness, and that self-awareness also impacts the type of leadership path you're going to pick. So for example, I'm just thinking like Rudy in your organization. So you can probably think of attorneys that may work for you or somewhere in Fidelity that really lead they're thought leaders. They may be, doing some groundbreaking work. They may be helping set precedent for the ways of working and the types of work or how you think about the work that you do, but they may not have a lot of people reporting to them, for example. But it's not to say that they're not leading. And then you'd have somebody like yourself, who you have a lot of people reporting to you. Those are different leadership paths. They're both valid, and they have different profiles of kind of what it takes to do those well. And if you have that self-awareness, you can also help choose the direction you go.
But sometimes the times defines the leaders, because you go through history, and there are people that nobody expected much from. And the good example now is the president of the Ukraine. He was a comedic actor, and he rose to the challenge. Nobody thought he had it. And then you look at somebody like Winston Churchill, who was a great leader during the war, but after the war, people got tired of him. And I think, in the case of the Ukraine, he's still proving himself and far exceeding anyone's expectations. But when you look back to something that's already happened, you say, well, okay, the same style doesn't apply, so you're gonna have to change your style. You're not at war anymore. I think another example all the way back in history is Alexander the Great. He just assumed that his soldiers are going to want to follow him into battle until he got to India. And they said, hey, we've had enough, right?
Right. And so there's so I think that applies to both the situation you're in. You're right. So the same, and this is, I think, the challenge sometimes with leadership, and this is where this ties into self-awareness too. The more senior you are, typically the less feedback you get. And the more success you have, the more it's easy to believe how great you are, right? And usually there's a lot of great things about you that got you to that point. So it's not like you're totally delusional. But you're right. A lot of times situations call for different kinds of leadership. And then also, as you raise to different levels of leadership, it requires different things. So there's Marshall Goldsmith is one of my favorite authors, and he talks about this idea of kind of what got you here won't get you there. So you also have to recognize that the ways that you lead have to change over time too. And if you can't know that and adjust the ways that you lead, you won't be successful. You have to adapt over time.
Well, that's especially true in the pandemic. It's harder to lead in the pandemic.
Yeah.
I think because you don't have the personal connection anymore. So you as a leader have to be creative.
Right.
What I've also seen, Beth, is that when somebody in their mind becomes a leader, it goes to their head. A classic example is St. Louis. There were a number of these municipalities, little municipalities. The mayor may make $50 a month or $300 a month, but because he's the mayor or the councilman, says, I've got power because I'm a leader. Right. And I think what people don't realize is the only power you have as a leader is the power that people give to you.
It's so true. It is so true. Yes. Yeah. And that's, it's interesting because the more senior you are, the more quote unquote positional power you have. Right. And but you've got positional power. So it's not like it's not true. Of course, you've got positional power to make decisions, fire, et cetera. But people really only truly engage with and truly admire and kind of fall on the sword for leaders that never stop leading by influence, who remember that, that is a privilege to lead. And it's important to take, acknowledge what, the time and attention people give you, and to honor that and to not get too caught up in that positional power.
But there are people who are afraid to lead. They're afraid to get into that.
Yeah.
They're afraid that they're going to make a mistake, and they don't want to make a mistake, or they don't want the responsibility.
Yeah.
I remember when Spider-Man in the movie became Spider-Man, his uncle said, you have a great responsibility.
Yes.
And it is, and a lot of people don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think they're afraid of that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So, it is a lot of responsibility. So I think some people just comprehend that. If I was going to coach somebody in that moment, the first thing I would say is let's take some time to listen to that kind of voice inside you. What is it telling you? Maybe it's telling you something about the path you should be taking in your career. For some people, it may be having all that responsibility is not going to be the best use of their skills and their talent. It may be that they don't want that in their life right now, and that's okay. So that would be my first thing, is like, let's make, there may be some wisdom here that's in that feeling, and let's listen to it and explore it. And then the second thing I would say is, let's also examine what's the story that you're telling yourself about that. And is that a true story? A lot of times, sometimes there may be fallacies in what the stories are and what you think it means to be a leader, that if you take time to examine it, you could work it through. Or maybe you still decide you don't want to be a leader. I mean, those are, so that's how I would think about it.
I think people often tell themselves no. And by the way, I see part of our audience, there's lawyers, there's, business people. These concepts apply whether you're managing a law firm, whether you're managing 1 million people, or whether you're just managing 2 people.
Right. Or being an entrepreneur that's just you, but still leading a company, right? Still leading what you're doing.
Exactly. Well, I think we talked earlier that are you born being a leader, or is that a skill you have to learn? Let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, can somebody be a complete dud all the time? In other words, there's no way this person will ever be a leader, no matter how hard he tries. I mean, I could say I'd love to sing, and if I could sing in a band, maybe with Def Leppard, I would leave the practice of law, but there's no way I'll ever be a good singer, no matter how much I try. The same concept apply to being a leader? Is it something you have to be born with, or is it something you can learn?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it depends on the time. So I would say everyone can lead. Now, can everybody be CEO? No. Can everyone be, have a role like yours? No. I mean, that's not everybody's suited to that. Not everybody has the right skill set, personality, etc. But in the way that you live your life, we get to lead all the time, right? I mean, all of us can impact other people. All of us can impact ideas. All of us can find ways to bring the things that we do best to the world and provide leadership and guidance in that. So I would say most everybody has leadership talents that they can develop. Yes. But can everybody is everyone suited to be a CEO or a very senior leader? I'd say no. But it doesn't mean that you can't have an impact. And it doesn't mean that we don't all have opportunities to lead every single day. Something happens in my neighborhood, for example. I don't like it. I have an opportunity to lead, right? Maybe leading neighbors, maybe speaking up, making a difference.
You can lead the revolt against the neighborhood association, right?
Well, right. You can do that. I mean, there's lots of ways we can all have an impact. And again, and what I would kind of come back to is, a way you can really think about that and get grounded in it is thinking about, what's your purpose? What are those unique things you do better than anybody else? We all have things that are unique that we do better than anybody else, every single person. And then how does that mesh with what's important to you in life? And then how do you show up?
How do you show up? Showing up is half of it.
Yeah, well, and again, all of us, very few of us cannot show up. So we're showing up. It's just, how do you want to show up?
Well, a good example today is the guy who just was successful in unionizing Amazon.
Yeah, right.
That was the David and Goliath battle.
Yeah, it's a great example. So if we kind of step back and think about him, we could all probably think about what his unique gifts are, right? Let's think about his purpose and how that helped him lead in that moment. So he's probably very good at inspiring, probably a good communicator, good at speaking up, good at reading what else everybody's feeling and helping articulate it and give words to it. My guess is we think about his values. He's probably very justice oriented. Very important, to think about everybody being treated fairly, and his integrity is probably very important for him. So he took kind of those unique things of him plus his values, and no one asked him to lead, right? He didn't have a leadership position. officially, but look what he did.
He basically jumped into it, didn't he?
He did. That's my, I mean, I'm, don't ask me 100 questions on this story, but from what I've looked at, my understanding of it is, this is really, it was very much it was organic, if you will. And he was a key person in all of that. He wasn't the only one, but very central.
We have a question that says, when you're seeing a political candidate being interviewed, how do you know, or how do you become aware that that candidate possesses the qualities of leadership?
Oh, do we
like seeing Biden being interviewed, or some of these other candidates? Are you able to tell?
I'm not sure you can tell. I mean, what I would say, it's hard to tell from an interview, right? Because think about all the preparation and support that goes into helping political candidates or political figures show up well in the media. I mean, they are coached, scripted and coached over and over and over again. I'd say probably looking at their actions might be more helpful. What do their actions tell you about their values? Who's around them? What does that tell you about their values and what they're trying to accomplish? What's their track record? I would be nervous being able to make any judgments based on an interview, personally.
Well, fear is also a factor, isn't it? I mean, everyone's afraid, but the leader's going to overcome the fear, right?
Well, you mentioned fear a couple of times, so I'd love to talk about fear. So fear is powerful, right? I mean, our brains, you and I talked a little bit about this last time. So we have one of the strongest, if you look at kind of the wiring pattern, if you will, in our brains, one of the strongest wiring patterns is fear. We are wired to survive. Fear tells us when something is going to threaten our survival. And it doesn't matter if it's abstract, social, or real physical fear, our brains process it all the same. It doesn't really matter. And so people can use fear to get people's attention. Absolutely, you kind of hijack people's brains when you get them all worked up and, get them to be afraid of something. So it is powerful. It will burn people out. When you're in a fear state, you've got a lot of cortisol going on, your heart rate goes up, you are, kind of an emotional level running a bit of a marathon. So it will burn people out. It's hard to kind of keep people there in a constant state of frenzy and worry and fear. But we've seen that media really helps do that a lot, unfortunately.
I think fear is a good thing. I think fear is a really good thing.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that people can do? They say, you get up in the morning, you say, I want to be a leader.
Yeah.
What do you recommend that people do to try to build that quality of being a leader? What are some of the, as a psychologist, I know you're an application psychologist, but you deal with this all the time.
Yeah.
What would you tell people that they should do on a daily basis?
Yeah, I will answer that question, and then I want to come back to why you think fear is a good thing.
Well, because fear makes you aware of the risk that's involved, and you have to calculate that. So you have to know what can go wrong and why it would go wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if you have no fear, I think you're more inclined to do something, say, stupid, that depending on what you're doing can get you killed.
Yes, I totally agree. Actually, that's why
I think it's a good thing. I mean, when you look at somebody like Rosa Parks, for example, and she said, I'm not sitting in the back of the bus, and she was afraid,
right.
Don't you think? And I bet you she didn't set out that day to say, well, I'm going to lead the civil rights movement. Maybe so. I don't know what went on in the planning, but she just says, I'm not sitting in the back, and boom, she was launched as a leader. So that's why I think fear is a good thing. You just evaluate consequences,
And I would agree. I asked that because I want to say it is a good thing. I think it gets used, weaponized sometimes. We see that a lot right now, but I would say every emotion we have is a good thing. Our emotions give us important information. And in the example of fear, it does tell it's a signal. And it's interesting because people who don't experience fear or don't have kind of fear on their radar screen tend to not do as well in life. There's been some interesting research on that. So they take much greater risks. They're typically not smart risks. They're overly optimistic and naive. So a little bit of fear is in some ways just a realism about the world, right?
Or not to the point where it paralyzes you. I mean, that's the thing. You get people that are the other extreme. They're so afraid that they don't do anything for fear of failure, or fear they don't do things perfect.
Right. And I would say when it comes to an emotion, I'd say this for all emotions, but especially when it comes to emotion like fear, it is important to remember that it's not who you are, it's an emotion you're having. And so it allows, if you can think of it that way and kind of set it outside yourself a little bit, then you can make conscious decisions about, what is this telling me? What do I want to do about it? How do I not get paralyzed? It doesn't have to define you. It's just you're a human being having an emotion at that moment that's trying to teach you something.
So what are some things that people can do every day?
Yes, every day.
Every day or every so often, if you wake up one morning and you want to be a leader, what is it that you can do?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I think one of the very, very important things that I think is especially relevant today is taking time to listen. So often when leaders are put into leadership roles, it's easy to think, okay, I kind of usually get there by being an expert, right? And then you think, okay, now people want me to be more of an expert. And in some ways, one of the most important things a leader can do is listen. Listen to your employees, listen to your external stakeholders, listen to your clients, listen to what's happening in the world, your customers, and really use that and learn from that, and build on everything you learn to help you lead the organization as well as lead your people. It teaches you what your people need, what your customers need, what your clients need.
Well, listening is the most important quality of a leader.
Yeah.
What's the next thing they can do?
Yeah. So I would say the next thing after listening is thinking about how are you going to be able to, and I'm going to kind of stay on the relationship thread a little bit, and then I want to step back and think about kind of vision, strategy, and those kinds of things, and also operations. But if we just stick with the relationships, I think the next thing, again, this is kind of in 2022 especially, I think there's two next things that are really important. One is understanding how to, once you've listened, how do you actually bring people together? How do you align people? How do you bring people's ideas together so that people feel included and respected, and that you're bringing the best ideas? I mean, we know that, at this point, we've got a lot of interesting data that the organizations that are most successful are the ones that are most diverse in all ways. In diversity of thinking, diversity of people, diversity of gender, diversity of race, all in every single way. And then if you bring all those ideas together, that's when you're most successful. So I think, how do you actually align people, bring those ideas out, get the best of ideas and align people together. So I think that's an important thing to do. And then the relationship piece, right? Like, how do you really get to know people? And especially if you're leading others, understanding what makes people tick, what motivates them, what's important to them, where they want their careers to go. How are you going to support their unique career development? What are the opportunities you're going to give them to shine? And that could be by what you delegate to them, what projects you assign them, where do you advocate for them to get experience or take roles even outside of your own group? So those are the people things.
Well, so basically it's know your people.
Right.
You're going to practice this, every day. One of the things you can do is the people you work with, get to know them.
Really get to know them. Right.
The more you get to know them, the more you're in a better position to be a leader.
Right.
So you're listening to them, getting to know them, and that's really building a relationship, right?
Yeah. And you want to know the whole person. I'm not saying become their therapist, I'm not all of that, but you really want to get to know the whole person.
Or become their best friend. You're never going to become everybody's best friend, right? So we're up to 3. We're up to 3 now,
Yeah.
right? Well, it's 4 if you count delegate, right? Delegate every day.
Yeah, you want to delegate.
Learn how to delegate. That's another way to become an
It's-
effective leader.
And I think delegate and empower. So you don't want to delegate to people without giving them some room, some resources to do the job and some room to figure it out. So if you delegate and micromanage, it's not going to work. You really want to give people tools and resources and some room to make it their own. You know, kind of give them a goal, but don't tell them everything that they have to do to get there. Give them some room to figure it out and support them. Find out what support they need to do.
And let them make mistakes.
Absolutely, without penalty. That's, recognizing, and again, I feel like especially now, I mean, everything is so fast changing, right? The situations everybody has to deal with are so intense that people need to have permission to figure things out. There needs to be permission to make a mistake, and the mistake should be seen as it's a learning opportunity. It's not failure. It's okay. So this didn't work out. Let's surround you with support to figure out how it's going to be better. And 99.9% of people actually want to learn from their mistakes and do a better job if they have the right support. But if you're penalizing them, getting them in trouble, demoting them, firing them, not only is it bad for that person, but now you've just sent a message to everybody in the organization that there's no room really for experimenting or making mistakes. Otherwise you get in trouble.
Well, I know one CEO of a company who says, I'm never going to criticize somebody for closing down an operation because that's their decision. But I will criticize them if they left it open way longer than it was necessary, because they need to make that decision, right?
Right.
So we've got now basically 5 items, right, by my count.
Yes.
Are there any more you can think of?
Yeah, so let's now, so these are, we've been very people oriented, right?
Right.
So let's now talk about kind of the what we often we don't always necessarily think of this, the things we more typically think of as leadership. So what's your vision? What's your strategy? And then how do you put enough structure in your organization that you've created some certainty for operations? So I think there's being able to set a vision for people that's inspirational, that connects to purpose and meaning and the contribution. So people feel, really inspired. Like, I mean, I think it's always been important to humans, but especially you hear a lot of talk about this in the younger generation of workers right now, that they want to work for places where they feel that they get to make a difference. There's a lot of problems for us to solve in the world, right? And so if you feel more engaged and more committed, if you feel like you're making a difference in solving a problem that needs to be solved. So being able to set that kind of vision and inspiration, giving people hope and purpose is an important thing, a place to connect their personal purpose. I think asking people to identify their purpose and what's that unique thing that they're going to bring, and helping everybody see that all organizations, live or die by their people. Right? I mean, really, the computer's not going to do the work the computer does the work that the people tells it to do. Manufacturing happens because the people have organized it and make it happen. So helping everybody feel valued, very valued, is really important too, as part of that inspiration.
Well, you bring up a good point, Beth, because it's not always about the money. It's people want to feel appreciated, and a leader needs to make somebody feel appreciated.
Yeah.
They may be willing to take less money if they feel, not that you cut their salary, but what I'm saying is, it's not, I want to make as much money as I can. Of course, we all do. But if somebody's comfortable and they're being rewarded and they feel their job is rewarding, they're less likely to be looking for other opportunities. At a certain point, compensation comes into play, but the primary factor is a good place to work.
It is the number one factor. I mean, now you hear, and I think this is starting to slow down a little bit, but especially last year, we heard all kinds of crazy stories about, somebody offered me twice as much as I was making before. So sometimes those things are hard to resist, and have been hard for people to resist. But normally, under normal times, as long as people feel that they're being paid fairly, so that means paid well. That doesn't mean, kind of not paid well. The things that will keep them engaged are going to be, do I get to develop my career? Do I feel valued? Do I feel that people see the unique thing that I bring? And I hear on a frequent basis, that was so great. I so appreciate this. This is what you do so well. And I'm going to give you more opportunities to do the thing you do so well. And some people would even go, there's Marcus Buckingham came out with some interesting research earlier this year that said that kind of optimum engagement, if you can help shape job responsibilities to a certain degree around people's real, those unique talents that they have where they kind of blow everybody else away. And again, we all have those things. If you can take time to figure out what those are and help focus their job responsibilities around those, it's nothing but a win-win. The organization gets the unique special talent that person can bring. They're super satisfied in the job from a career perspective, and you really can keep people engaged. It's a new way to think about engagement.
I think my rule, Beth, is that I want to be the dumbest one in the room.
Mm-hmm.
When I surround myself, I like surrounding myself with people who are smarter than me. And quite often I have to do that because I have to retain people who do a certain job. And if I'm retaining them, they have to know how to do it.
Yeah.
And they have to know how to do it more than me. Where
Right.
it becomes a problem is when I know how to do it more than them, then I'm thinking, why are you in? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I'm going to challenge you a little bit on that, Rudy, because I do think, I do a lot of leadership assessment work, and a lot of times part of that work is doing 360 assessments. And I will hear, sometimes a leader can be, if you're too inclusive, or you're not sharing enough of what your expertise is, the folks that you're leading will miss that. Sometimes I'll hear people say, okay, I know that my leader really has an important opinion on this, or I know my leader would just weigh in a little bit. It would help us get to wherever we need to go faster or better. And I love that my leaders ask for all our voices, but now I want to hear from them.
You have to have an opinion, but the point is that everybody in the room has to offer something.
Yeah.
And perhaps a skill set that you don't have, but you have to you're the one that makes a decision. So I think the leader's opinion is based A, on his years of experience, B, his expertise, and then getting that information, absorbing it, and then making the decision.
Yeah. And having a strong, I'm not disagreeing. You want a very strong.
I think there are some people who criticize that remark from me. So no, that's not a good idea. I said, well, I just like surrounding myself with smarter people, but that's just me.
It'll make you better, right? I think that's actually some of the best leaders. That is a key thing that they do, is they know where they're strong, they know where they're not strong, and they surround themselves with people that can compensate for those things, and they're all better together.
Well, Beth, I'm going to ask you a question for the benefit of the lawyers. We have a number of lawyers here, and then we have a question, a final question we'll leave with, because I think it's an interesting question. Running a law firm is like herding cats.
Right.
Because you have so many incredible egos in a law firm, especially you've got partners who can generate business, who have these talents. It would seem to me that leadership in a law firm is a lot more difficult in some ways. And I want to say, they'll probably, some of my colleagues will probably, when they see me, they'll punch me. But I'll say you often have a group of prima donnas, that think you can't tell me what to do. I'm going to run things the way I want to do, or I'm the better lawyer, or I'm the one bringing the business. I'm the one working it. To me, it seems it's a much harder position to lead, but the principles stay the same, right?
Yes, I'd say that the principles stay the same. I do think it is, and you and I talked about this. I've had phases in my career where I've done quite a bit of work within law firms. I think that my experience is the managing partners, the best ones are the ones who are, some of the characteristics we've talked about earlier. So humble, they're good listeners. They really want to serve in some ways to kind of elevate everybody's talent. So they're not necessarily, the leader as much as they're there to pull everybody together to get the best ideas. They're servant leaders very much. I think the managing partners I've seen who do the best job are really servant leaders. They're there to serve the other partners, serve the firm, do a good job. And I think that they recognize it is like herding cats, right? I mean, you have enormous amount of intellectual horsepower in a law firm, right? A lot of people who are
not always, but yeah, you're supposed to.
but usually you do, and it's all people that people come to for expertise, right? So that's the job, is being an expert, part of the job, certainly. So I think being able to just see that for what it is, and recognize the great part of that, and then be a servant leader and be humble and just listen well. That's what I've seen work the best in law firms.
Yeah. I've number of my colleagues in law firms basically, have indicated to me that it's really difficult to manage a law firm. It's, difficult to work with all the, different egos and different personalities, especially the bigger the firm, the harder it is to manage. Sometimes, and which is why you see, people coming and going sometimes. But I what I want to stress to the people who are listening who are with law firms is that it may seem more stressful, but the principles we discussed are really the same.
I would agree. And the one thing we haven't really talked about very much, Rudy, is decision making as a leader. So I think this especially, I think, is relevant as a managing partner or people that are on the management committee of a law firm. How do you make decisions, right? There's so many opinions, and people are lobbying behind the scenes, and all the politics that often go into this in a law firm, at least from what I've seen. So I think having a defined decision-making approach doesn't mean you have to say it out loud a lot, but recognize that you're going to have a lot of people lobbying you a lot, right, to make a decision or go their way. Whether, and it could be on the big decisions, and I would hear silly things lobbied for, like, where do we put the toilet paper for the new bathroom? All these just silly, everything from the reasonable to the silly. And I think being able to have a defined process, so how are you going to make a decision? How are you going to weigh your options? How are you going to, are you going to enter data into it? How are you going to make sure that you're objective? How do you get different perspectives? How do you think about, what's really going to be for the common good? Because that's where I've seen some challenges, and I've seen it not just with the managing partners, but I've also seen it with kind of the executive officers sometimes in a law firm. There are times where you just have to make a call, right? You've got to do what's for the greater good. And so having a set process in your mind for how you're going to do that, and then thinking about how you're going to explain it. And then usually you can explain it the best when you've gone through a logical, deliberate process in your decision making.
I used to have a client in private practice who was in the entertainment industry. And whenever I tried to give him business advice, I said, no, you don't understand. That's not how it works in my business. And people who think like that are often headed towards failure, because it's almost like, okay, the rules of business apply and management apply everywhere else in the world except for your little business, and I think that's another issue, is the closed-mindedness. There's sometimes lawyers will say, well, it's a law firm, it's not a business, but it's really a business.
Right.
At the end of the day, you have to make money, you have to show a profit no matter what. It's no different than anything else.
Right. Absolutely. Right. You've got your normal expenses. You've got your clients. You've got, your products, your clients, right, and the work that you do.
There's a question that says, are there some Q questions that you frequently ask to make people show themselves exactly the way they really are? And I think what this question really is some people hide their personality. They mask. They're doing a job interview and they just present an image that oh, I'm a great leader, or I'm great at this, but guess this person's asking for maybe some examples of questions that you've asked to try to vet them out, you know?
And when you say, so is this in a job interview situation, or is this more to help people understand their own unique kind
Well,
of?
both.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of looking at history, personal history. Yeah, I have to tell you, when I was in graduate school, I took 4 classes, total 12 credit hours in assessment. And I remember on day 1 of, the first assessment class I ever took with a very well-respected professor who developed lots of tests. He said, I'm going to teach you a ton of things about assessments and, tests and how to interpret and blah, blah, blah. But he said, never forget, past behavior predicts best. And so I say that because I think understanding history. So if you think about for yourself, if you really want to identify kind of what are your own unique strengths, how does that tie to your purpose? Really think carefully about your own history. I mean, you can go all the way back to when you were young. What are the times in your life when you really shined? When you did something that was really unique and better than most people, where you had a big success, where it was really recognized, where you felt very proud of yourself. And then what are the times where the opposite happened, right? Where, you really didn't do well, you really didn't shine, you let people down, or it was a big disappointment. And using those kind of highs and lows, it's like thinking a little bit like a life map, if you will, to then, once you kind of have that data, go back and say, what does this tell you about yourself? About the way you approach life, and then how you show up and where you shine and what your strengths are and not. And the same way you can do that for yourself, in an interview, I think, this is part of why we ask people about their job history, right? We want to try to understand. And a lot of times people prepare for interviews, so you have to be careful, right? They've got all their perfect answers. But sometimes I find if you just kind of let people go a little bit and say, talk to me about, a first job, and just let them talk a little bit. And then sometimes ask a question, sometimes a different way, well, what would your boss have said if that was the thing that you did best, or your best contribution? Or what would your boss have said? Like, oh my gosh, this is, if I were to go talk to your boss, what would they say to me about this? Is the one thing they probably don't do well, and you don't want to give them too much, exposure in doing this thing. But just letting people talk, what I find is if you just, again, it's the listening, people will start to reveal that, if you're trying to see it in other people.
The more you let them talk, I think the more they'll give themselves away. Nobody can mask themselves for an indefinite period of time. Perhaps during a 10 or 15-minute conversation, perhaps on a first date, perhaps in the first interview. Right. But eventually the true colors will show in that sense.
Right.
They'll always show.
Absolutely.
Another question is, speaking of emotions, do you consider that family education in the United States gives importance to the emotional formation of children?
Good question.
The same question talking about the school education.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think there's a shift right now, but if we think about our generation, right, and even the people that are not that far behind us, right, Rudy? No, I don't think we've been very good at all. I mean, some individuals are unique, some families are unique, of course, but I think we've not been so good about helping people become what, I love the idea of emotional agility from Amy Edmondson. We're not very good at that. They say, like, if you look at rubrics, if you will, of emotions, there's like, over 100, 200 emotions we can all identify as subtle differences. Most Americans, if you ask them to, talk to me, how many emotions are there? They identify like 3 or 4. We're not very sophisticated in that way. I do think it's changing though. There's so much, there needs to be more of this, but there's some really interesting things happening in schools right now where it's some combination of kind of emotional intelligence as well as mindfulness, helping kids be in touch with what's happening with themselves, putting words to it, thinking about how they can sit with their emotions and be comfortable, and then, allows them to be choiceful about what they do. I don't think there's enough of that work, but I think there's a bit of a shift. But I think historically, with most of the middle-aged and older adults, that was not part of what was emphasized.
Well, the good leader has to keep into account the generational differences.
Right.
Which is why some companies have a philosophy: you're either moving up or you're moving out. Because
Mhm.
if you don't want to move up, then you're just blocking somebody who wants to move up. And so you need to move out. And I think when times are rough and the layoffs have to come, the people who show leadership qualities, the people who show motivation, they show inspiration, they show dedication, are more likely the ones that are going to stay. There's no guarantee, because during the crisis in 2008, a lot of good people got let go just because there was no other choice, but they were the last to get let go.
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
So
Right.
Beth, in sum, I guess, to be a leader, you have to listen,
Yes.
right? You
Yeah.
have to bring people together, which means you have to network.
Yes.
You have to know who you're leading
Right. Right. And
and
have empathy for them. Have empathy.
have empathy, and you need to learn how to delegate.
Yeah. Delegate. And I think, and really understand your own purpose, and then help other people understand their own purpose too.
Well, thank you so very much. It was fun doing part 2 of this interview.
Yes. Rudy.
Um, for those of you who don't know, Beth is or who came in later, Beth is a practicing psychologist who basically is not a clinician, but somebody who applies her trade, her education, in helping companies select the right executive for
Mhm.
that particular company under those circumstances.
Yes.
I thank you so much. Say hello to the kids and Tom, and I appreciate you doing this, and thank you everyone on Zoom who came in, and everyone on LinkedIn. We'll have more conversations on these topics, leadership and development. Thank you so much, Beth. I really appreciate it. Goodbye, everybody.
You take care. Thanks, everybody.
Don't forget, you are watching Conversations with Rudy Rivera.